Happy draft day, Panther fans. With the Florida Panthers having 5 picks in this year's entry draft, are we expecting a big splash or for Bill Zito to make all the picks at his disposal?
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, June 28th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at Monoman12. Follow the show account on Twitter and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. So it is draft night for the NHL, a Thursday draft this year with the city of Nashville hosting, but so many things going on this week in the capital of country music, in Nashville and Music City, but lots of fun that a lot of players are going to have with players' dreams coming true of playing in the NHL, or at least being drafted in the NHL, because a lot of these players won't be on NHL rosters immediately. But it is a Winans Wednesday, which means Jacob Winans is back for today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, and we'll put the draft talk more in the third and final segment, where we're going to talk all about the draft. But Jacob, once again, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. Lots of exciting stuff to talk about. Happy draft day to all the prospects that their lives are quite literally about to change forever today and tomorrow. And really excited for all of those guys. I'm sure that's a huge honor for all of them and their families, and a culmination of all the work they put in to get to this point. So hopefully all the prospects enjoy today and tomorrow and the work that comes after that. Lots of Panthers related stuff to talk about today, even though we don't have a first round pick, and we're going to be, like you said, pre-recording, watching today with just a little bit more relaxed. Nothing too stressful for us today.
Yeah, first round starts at 7 p.m. on ESPN and ESPN Plus. Day 2 starts at 11 a.m. on NHL Network if you are in the States. But first, let's talk mostly about the NHL awards. Of course, kicking off the week in Nashville for all the events. The prospects went through their media days, and also the guys who were there at the award shows when coming to the Music City. And Matthew Tkachuk was, of course, seen there in a sling, and of course he finished third in the voting for the Hart Trophy. 0 first place votes, 54 second place votes, 53 third, 27 fourth, and 17 fifth place votes to finish third in the Hart Trophy voting, behind David Pastrnak and Connor McDavid. And one person did not vote Connor McDavid first, and actually that same person voted him fifth. It was actually a writer from Tribune Sports in Pittsburgh. So that is the person who ended up not voting McDavid first there. But what are your thoughts on Matthew Tkachuk not finishing second, and of course the troll job that was not voting McDavid first?
Yeah, so I'll start with the McDavid vote. I think at the end of the day, of course, it doesn't really matter that much, because McDavid still wins the award, and that's all anyone really is going to talk about 10, 20, 30 years from now, is he won the Hart Trophy, and that's what matters with that. But it is a big honor to be a unanimous MVP, and I think he deserved it. And voting him fifth, it's completely ridiculous. And I think I really think it's a cheap way of getting attention, and it's a cheap way of using the ballot that you have the privilege of having a say in. And I didn't like it. I thought it was a not great move. And at the end of the day, McDavid is the MVP and he won the trophy, but I think he should have been unanimous, and one honestly comical ballot shouldn't really discredit what he did this season. So, yeah, I don't want to give it too much attention, but I just think it was kind of ridiculous, and McDavid definitely was deserving of a unanimous MVP honor. But to not even put him second just shows how unserious that vote was. To put him fifth, there's not 4 guys in the NHL more valuable to their team than Connor McDavid. There's just no chance. You can't argue that. So I thought that was pretty ridiculous. And then with Matthew Tkachuk, I felt like he kind of got disrespected in the Hart Trophy voting there. I know it's not a postseason award; it's a regular season award. But I still felt like Matthew Tkachuk was outside of McDavid. There's no player in the NHL who is more valuable to his team than Matthew Tkachuk, and this is where we go back to that argument that everyone likes to talk about. Is it for the best player or is it for the most valuable player? Because it's very different. Matthew Tkachuk, I would still argue he's a better player than David Pastrnak, but I don't think you can even debate whether he was more valuable to the Panthers than Pastrnak was to the Bruins. The Boston Bruins are still probably the best team in the Eastern Conference without David Pastrnak last season. And that's not to put down anything that he did, because he had a remarkable season. And if McDavid hadn't won the Hart Trophy, Pastrnak definitely probably would have won, given his stats. But I think Matthew Tkachuk's impact on the Panthers is far greater than David Pasternak's impact on the Bruins. The Panthers are nowhere near the playoffs if not for Matthew Tkachuk's heroics and quite literally carrying the team for large stretches of last season. So I thought Matthew Tkachuk not finishing second was kind of ridiculous. I think the Panthers in general kind of got snubbed in some of the voting. In other areas, like the Norris Trophy voting, did not make any sense to me. Seeing Brandon Montour come in 12th, there were not 11 defensemen in the NHL this year better or more effective than Brandon Montour. I thought that was ridiculous. And with Matthew Tkachuk finishing third in the Hart Trophy voting, still a great honor for him, a top 3 finish. But I think if anything, he's coming in more motivated next season, because he was deserving of better than that. At the end of the day, though, when it comes to Tkachuk and Pastrnak may have finished second, but the Panthers definitely had the last laugh. Matthew Tkachuk had the last laugh in the postseason. No one's forgetting that series anytime soon, and that was all started by Matthew Tkachuk. And I think that means a little bit more to Chucky and anyone else on the Panthers roster.
Yeah, we're just over 2 months since that win in Game 5 where Linus Ullmark turns it over from trying to clear it in the zone, gets into the corner to Verhaeghe, and then back to Tkachuk to score backhand there. And you think about whether the Panthers would even be a playoff team, and I could argue they wouldn't if it weren't for the heroics of Matthew Tkachuk this season, basically carrying them. And before we transition, some of the awards that were won, Carlson wins the Norris, Andre Kopitar wins the Lady Byng, now 2-time winner. King Clancy goes to Michael Backlund. Jim Montgomery wins the Jack Adams, and what an incredible speech by Jim Montgomery based on everything that he's went through with addiction as well. Patrice Bergeron wins his 6th Selke, and Linus Ullmark wins the Vezina. So that is the wrap when it comes to some of the awards. There'll be more awards announced later, including the Jim Gregory for GM of the Year. So we'll find out very soon on that front. But we do have a schedule to discuss, as the NHL has released their opening night and regular season schedule for the 2023-24 season. And we're going to discuss this next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about FanDuel Sportsbook, and take your first swing at betting on Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend on everything from the money line to over under who you think will get the first home run. All in the app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. After today's show, make sure you check out Locked On's 2023 mock draft special. Local hosts of the Locked On NHL Network have made their picks, and hosts Gil Martin and Heidi Kalakash break down every selection over a 3-day mock draft event. Find the episodes on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. So, Jacob, the NHL schedule has come out for the 2023-24 season, and the Florida Panthers are starting off on the road again. Another three-game road trip schedule, a little different this time around, as they're starting a little bit in the Midwest, starting in Minnesota, Winnipeg, and then going east to New Jersey. But I thought opening night for the Panthers, I thought it was going to be against the Carolina Hurricanes. That was my initial thought, that was going to be opening night, or against Boston. But the NHL decided to put opening night against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And the weird thing about the home schedule is you face the Toronto Maple Leafs twice. The first one is in the very beginning of the season, and then the last one is the last home game of the season. Instead of putting it in the middle, where in the times of Christmas, where there's a lot of snowbirds coming down, or even spring break in March, you're not getting to the Toronto Maple Leafs in that part of the schedule. So a little odd when it comes to that as well. Of course, you're still going to get the little peaks of touristy times with the Montreal Canadiens and the New York Rangers coming to town during those portions of the calendar year. But it's road heavy once again to start the season. 23 road games to 18 home games to start the season. The month where it gets a little brutal when it comes to road games is the month of November and January, but the home heavy schedule part is February and December, a little bit of there. But you were actually discussing pre-recording on what you thought of the schedule about the back-to-back situation for the Panthers. But I'm gonna give my take on back-to-backs with the Panthers. There are 7 back-to-backs. Only one of them are at home. But the way I'm seeing this, and there's still plenty of time to look over the schedule and break down, because there's only so much we can break down for 82 games. They're not jam-packed. They're not packed up in multiple weeks of back-to-backs where there's a whole lot of 4 games and 5 nights. So we're not going to see a whole bunch of 4 or 5 days off in the schedule like we did last season with all back-to-backs jammed. In this schedule, it's more spread out, which I'm kind of in favor of when it comes to this year's schedule versus last.
I do agree with that. I think the fact that it's not all kind of bunched together, where we have situations where it's, say, 4 games in 6 nights and things like that. I don't love when we have those kind of situations. But with the back-to-back schedule, I think that the NHL could have done a better job of giving the Panthers some home back-to-backs. I think having 6 of those 7 back-to-backs be on the road, it's pretty frustrating to see that, for just knowing how intense that travel can be, and how the Panthers have had some struggles on the second nights of back-to-backs, just like every team in the NHL when travel is involved. I think having home back-to-backs is a big advantage, just from a rest conservation perspective and a fan support perspective. Being able to play a couple times in a row in front of your home fans in back-to-back nights, that's always nice. But without them having that, it is what it is. the schedule is definitely not as unkind as it could be. I think the first 2 months, some of the opponents they play are somewhat light on paper, which is nice. And that's not to discredit anyone. The NHL is a league where you can win or lose on any given night. So that's not to say that the Panthers are going to have a cakewalk in the first couple of months, but having games against a team like Winnipeg, a team like San Jose, a team like Vancouver in the first month, that gives you an opportunity to get off on the right foot. And then in November, you have both games against Chicago. You have Columbus in there. You've got Winnipeg, San Jose again. Montreal is in there. A couple more winnable games, teams that are going to be a little bit better this season, but not necessarily super huge threats would be Detroit, Washington, Anaheim. Some of those teams are all in the first 2 months, which is really, really key for the Panthers because we are not going into next season fully healthy. There are going to be key players who aren't ready for the start of the season, and the Panthers are going to have to find a way to get off on the right foot without them. So I think from that perspective, the first 2 months are somewhat beneficial in that regard, where we're not playing a ton of our key division opponents like right off the bat, and having to find a way to beat all of these playoff contenders right away. I think we're in a good position to stay afloat until we get a little bit healthier and get some of our key guys back in the lineup. So overall, I'm cautiously optimistic about how the Panthers will start this season. Long way to go. Rosters can look very different between now and October, including the Panthers roster. We'll see what kind of team we bring into next season, but I'm cautiously optimistic. And a couple of those key games, Toronto at home to start the season, I love that idea. Past 2 years, the Panthers haven't even played the Maple Leafs for the first time until way late in the season, which I don't understand. Get that one out of the way early. That's going to be an electric atmosphere when they presumably raise the Eastern Conference champions banner against a team that they had to beat on the way there, a team that was that kind of fell into disarray after losing that series. There's definitely some, not necessarily bad blood, but both teams will be pretty intense about that one. So I'm looking forward to that. And December, there's going to be a lot of fun games at home in December. Rangers, Montreal, and of course Vegas comes to town. So should be fun. I really do like this schedule. I think it's favorable for the Panthers.
Vegas on a matinee too, on a Saturday as well. And there's only one instance where there's two back-to-backs in 1 month, and that's in the middle of a West Coast trip, LA and Anaheim, which is a 45-minute drive from each other, and Ottawa and Toronto, which is a quick train ride from Ottawa to the Mecca of hockey as well. And the Florida Panthers played the Ottawa Senators once on the road last year, and this year they're going to be playing them twice. So they're getting and as well as the Habs and Maple Leafs twice as well on the road as well. So they're going to complete their Eastern Canadian road trip all in one. So it's going to be happening mostly in four nights for the Panthers there. And that's where the travel is a little easier when it comes to playing games on back-to-back nights as well. And they're, of course, early on, they're getting their West Coast trips out of the way. They have one in November. They have one in December where they're going to Western Canada as well. And then the southwest portion of the West Coast trips is going to take place in January. So northern part on November. So they're getting over that part of the schedule fairly early, and their bye week prior to All-Star break is going to come before the All-Star weekend. A lot of teams have it after, and this year for another consecutive year, the Florida Panthers' break will come the week before All-Star weekend. So that a little bit of that when it comes to the schedule. Of course,
I want to. Sorry to cut in. I wanted to get your thoughts real quick on something in the first month of this season. The October 24th against San Jose. Obviously, you notice we have the 7:45 start time. I want to get your thoughts on that experiment the NHL is doing, where all 32 teams will play, and every game starts 15 minutes apart. Not a single game drops the puck at the same time as any other game. I want to get your thoughts on that. What you think of that experiment by the NHL?
ESPN Plus, get ESPN Plus is what I have to say, because you have a game starting as late as 11 p.m. I think it's Vegas, Philadelphia on that night, and you are gonna. This is an opportunity to use that package to your advantage, and I think that's what the NHL is trying to do as far as that. A little bit of a weird start time at home, but it's better for that for the Florida Panthers perspective, for that to be a home game versus a road game. So any start time in between 7 and 8 and 8:15 for the Panthers perspective, not a big issue for me. But I'm not going to stay up and watch every single one of the games because we both have day jobs. But as far as instead of watching while I'm watching the Bally Sports pregame coverage, there's an opportunity for me to turn on another screen and watch another game in action versus the fact that all of them happen at the same time on most nights. So I think we're going to see more of that. We mostly only really see it on the weekends during matinee games, but it's an opportunity for the NHL to really grow its product. And they also have a very filled Black Friday schedule as well. So that's another date on the calendar. They're not going to play on Thanksgiving because they're going to be overshadowed by the NFL, and they don't play on Christmas because they're going to be overshadowed by the NBA as well. So let's also consider that when it comes to how the NHL is trying to structure and how they're trying to grow their product as well. So I think it's a really cool experiment for a league that's still a little behind when it comes to trying to build. So those are my initial thoughts on it. So yeah, a good opportunity in my opinion. But Jacob, it's draft day. Are you ready to talk some draft in our next segment?
Absolutely.
Awesome. We're with the Florida Panthers having 5 picks. We are going to discuss whether we anticipate the Florida Panthers making a big move during the draft, or if we expect them to trade back into the first round. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment here on this Wednesday, June 28th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Is a Winans Wednesday edition of the show, and it's draft night. And it's funny being a South Florida sports fan with the Dolphins and the Panthers not having first round picks for multiple years. It's a little bit of a time for us to kind of look like this. If you're watching on YouTube, I had my hands behind my head and just pretending that I'm in a recliner chair, just sitting back and watching the draft, as far as knowing that you are in a position of contention as well, which makes this night a little less stressful. And, as you guys can see from the episodes we have produced out recently, there hasn't been really any draft coverage when discussing the state of the Florida Panthers. Not going to pretend like we know every one of the prospects. And with the Florida Panthers being eliminated not until the Stanley Cup final, there hasn't been much turnaround as far as evaluating the second or third round prospects who might not even be part of the Florida Panthers organization. The chances of a pick after the 24th pick playing over 100 games in the NHL is less than 2%. So just to give you guys a little bit of perspective for the as far as the why when it comes to the draft coverage. But we all know who's going number 1 overall, Connor Bedard from the WHL Regina Pats, and was basically carrying the Regina Pats into the postseason for them. But really, probably the real draft starts at 3. There's talk about Adam Fantilli going number 2 to the Anaheim Ducks, but there's also maybe talk that Matej Michkov could go number 2 as well, or Leo Carlson. It's a very center heavy draft. The the run at defensemen are probably not going to go until maybe number 8, number 9. But there's also talk of maybe Matthew Tkachuk maybe slipping all the way to 8 to Washington, and he could leave Russia earlier than expected. But I also think that Tkachuk fits a timeline of a specific team based on their rebuild. The San Jose Sharks. Tkachuk doesn't have to leave Russia for another few years based on his contract with the KHL. So I think that if Tkachuk is at number 4, I think it'll be a perfect opportunity for the San Jose Sharks to take him as well. Adam Fantilli being a Hobey Baker winner, Leo Carson being a part of the SHL coming over. But also, Jacob, Montreal is an interesting one. At number 5, possibly they could take Will Smith in the draft as well. But also, a team to watch for, 2 teams to watch for, excuse me. The Nashville Predators, who have 13 picks in the draft, a whole bunch of draft ammunition. Barry Trotz being a first-time GM. This could be his opportunity to put a bang when it comes to the draft and putting his staple as an I have arrived when it comes to trading up. So there's been talk about the Montreal Canadiens being that team. And also Montreal has traded the 31st pick that they got from the Panthers in the Ben Sherratt trade for Alex Newhook as well. And St. Louis is another one, 3 first-round picks. Vladimir Tarasenko and Ryan O'Reilly, they're getting picks for there. So that's another team who could possibly make a splash as far as trading up. So as far as the teams, not the Panthers, what are you thinking about this NHL entry draft with round 1 tonight?
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the most impressive drafts at the top that we've seen in recent memory. Between Bedard and Fantilli, this is probably the closest thing we're getting to the McDavid Eichel 1-2 back in that draft. I think any other year, Fantilli's got the number 1 spot on lock. The season he had as a freshman at Michigan was nothing short of remarkable. And I think he's a lock to go number 2. And Anaheim all of a sudden looks really scary long term. That looks like a team that has the foundation to eventually contend for a Stanley Cup. Chicago's got a lot of work to do. It doesn't get any better as a building block than Connor Bedard. And all the talk about him, there's a lot of people who don't necessarily follow the NHL draft the same way you follow the NFL draft or the NBA draft, simply because in hockey, players are not exactly immediate impact players. Typically takes a year, 2 years, sometimes longer before you see your draft pick make it to the NHL.
Same with baseball. Baseball's the same way.
Exactly. And hockey and baseball are the 2 sports where the draft is not necessarily as hyped up or closely followed. With the NHL draft this year, Connor Bedard is the NHL version of Victor Wembanyama. He's an absolute physical marvel. A guy at his age to produce the way he has. He's a generational talent. So he's really the Wemby of hockey, and people should be ready to watch him right away, because he's going to play in the NHL right away. He's going to produce right away. Would not be shocked at all to see him be a 30-goal scorer right away. He's that good. The most interesting player in the entire draft to me, like you said, is Matvei Michkov. I think he's honestly, talent-wise, he probably could be the second best player in this draft. He would have a legitimate case to be the second best player in this draft, ahead of Adam Fantilli. He's the best Russian prospect since Alex Ovechkin. There's no doubt about that for me. He's the best Russian prospect since Alex Ovechkin. In most years, he would be the best player. I think talent-wise, he's if we're doing this draft picking based on pure talent and potential, I take Michkov before Fantilli, and that's crazy to say because Fantilli was insanely good this season. But that's how good the top end of this draft is, and I think Michkov would be the second pick, if not for concerns about, one, his KHL contract, how long he's going to be in Russia before he comes over, and two, just the fact that he does play in Russia, and there's so much instability and uncertainty when it comes to Russia right now on a political and global scale. I think it's really concerning for some teams. And I think, like you said, a team like San Jose is one that can afford to take that risk. They're in a good spot in their rebuild right now. They have a chance to really accelerate it if they do end up trading Erik Karlsson and get a haul of assets back. They can really hit the reset button and slowly build this. And I think he would be the cornerstone of that if they were to take him. And they can afford to let him play out his KHL contract. If he does fall due to the Russian factor, Washington is the obvious answer. That yes, Washington will probably take him. I don't think he gets past Washington. Alex Ovechkin is essentially the ambassador of hockey to Russia right now. And if Ovi is there in Washington, then Michkov will have no problem coming over to the Capitals at when he's ready to. So I don't think he falls past Washington, but I don't think he gets that far. I think San Jose is probably the team that takes him. And if San Jose doesn't take him, I feel certain Montreal will take him. So. And for me, I hope it's San Jose. I want all of these elite franchise-altering talents out west. Bedard in Chicago, Fantilli in Anaheim, Michkov in San Jose. Take all these talents out west because the East is a gauntlet as it is. I don't want any more of these guys in the Atlantic Division because the Atlantic Division is the toughest in hockey. Get all these guys out west so we can only face them twice a year instead of 3 or 4 times a year, and we don't have to worry about them in the playoffs. So that's my stance on it. And also, like you said, the 31st pick, that was an interesting storyline yesterday. At one point, Montreal was talking about, that pick is going to be in the lottery, Sherratt for Bedard. No, it ends up being the 31st pick, and they trade it anyway in a smaller, relatively small package for Alex Newhook, which I personally feel they overpaid a little bit, but Alex Newhook is a guy with some potential, so we'll see. But at the end of the day, they definitely didn't get anything close to a lottery pick or Connor Bedard in exchange for Ben Sherratt. So that was another big positive of the Panthers' deep playoff run. They substantially lessened the value of that pick just by winning games.
It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt as much. That's for sure. So that's the great thing
Not at all.
That part. So I'm over that trade. Honestly, I'm for the most part. It's in the past. Colorado's gonna make that pick, sure. And it's gonna. We can definitely move on from that. But for the Panthers, their picks, which won't come until Thursday, which starts at 11 a.m. on NHL Network. 63 in the second round, 127th in the fourth round, 159th in the fifth round, 191 in the sixth, and 198th in the seventh, which was Arizona's pick. I think the only way you could trade back into the first round if Sam Reinhart is traded before the NHL entry draft tonight, which I'm okay with the Florida Panthers keeping him, but I'm also if it's cap relief to sign a big name defenseman, you could also see that as far as that. So I think the chances that are super low as far as the Florida Panthers trading back into the first round. But it's this is a little bit of an awkward situation right now for a certain player on the Florida Panthers, and that's Anthony Duclair. Right now, Anthony Duclair is running a youth hockey clinic at the youth hockey development camp right now from July 26th to the 29th. So it'll end on Thursday at the Panthers Ice Den. And Dave Prognata of the fourth period reported that the Florida Panthers are actively shopping Anthony Duclair now. And of course, we spoke about the whole connection with Noah Hannafin last week about how the Florida Panthers don't want to make that trade if they don't have to. But it's kind of a little bit of an awkward situation how the Florida Panthers have donated to the Duclair Foundation. Now him being shopped a little bit. So Jacob, with these 5 picks and Anthony Duclair on the trade block, actually let's do a little experiment. Let's say our number at the same time. So what are the chances that Bill Zito makes all these picks? Are you ready? 3, 2, 1. 5%.
0.
Okay.
I really don't think he's going to make all these picks. I think there's going to be a trade. When it comes to Anthony Duclair, his situation's really strange because there is no secret that Jonathan Huberdeau wants to play with Duclair again if Calgary is able to get him. in a trade. And the Panthers are definitely interested in Noah Hannafin, and reportedly they're interested in Nikita Zadorov as well, which personally I'm not a big fan of that one at all. But I think Calgary holds that leverage because we are in desperate need of a defenseman, especially one with size. Noah Hannafin fits the bill, and he's a great skater for his size. I think if you look at a potential D partner for Aaron Ekblad, Noah Hannafin would be absolutely perfect, and he's everything that you'd want to pair with Ekblad. And then if you want to try to keep the Ekblad Forsling pairing together going forward, which I don't think the Panthers necessarily have given up on that idea. I personally think Forsling and Montour is a little bit better, and you have Ekblad and potentially a guy like Hannafin, but Hannafin would also go really, really well with Brandon Montour. A guaranteed upgrade over a guy like Mark Stahl, and I'm sure Montour would love to play with a guy like that coming up in his contract year. So yeah, the Calgary really holds the leverage because the Panthers really need a guy like Noah Hannafin. And if they make it as simple as Anthony Duclair needs to be included or no deal, we're not really in a position where we can fight that too much. And that would be really unfortunate because anyone who knows me knows that Anthony Duclair is one of my favorite players to ever put on the Panthers uniform, not just for what he's done on the ice, his overcoming a major injury and being a huge contributor in the playoffs, but what he's done off the ice as well holds a ton of value for me. And I think he's done an excellent job of growing the game in South Florida. So personally, if it were up to me, I'd love to see him finish his career as a Panther. I would never want to see him play in another uniform. But it's the business of hockey, and if he is traded, I hope it's Calgary and he's able to play with Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar again. He and Huberdeau have excellent chemistry, and I have no doubt that he'll have a successful career wherever it is. If it isn't in Florida, if you're able to keep him, then I think like it so often does, players who are shopped in trades and then end up staying. That's very often a huge motivating factor. And I really think he's in for a bounce back season next year with or without that extra motivation because he is coming in fully healthy and I think he'll find his game again. So that I hope we're able to keep him, but defense is definitely this offseason's priority and we'll see where that goes. But yeah, definitely a tricky situation. But what I would tell people to look for in this next couple of days here would be for the Panthers to trade a later round pick for someone's UFA rights, not RFA rights, UFA rights, and afford yourself that exclusive negotiating window. I think there's a lot of defensemen who are UFAs that know they're not re-signing with their teams. And if you're able to be the first person to make an offer, it may be worth a late round pick to trade for the UFA rights of a defenseman. And then you have a few extra days to work out a deal and get them to sign long-term. So that's what I would tell people to look for. And that's why I don't think the Panthers will make all of their picks. I would not be shocked to see Bill Zito send a later round pick, a mid-round pick, later round pick for a UFA defenseman from another team. Somebody like Carson Soucy or Ryan Graves, one of those guys who's coming up on free agency this July 1st. That would be my situation to watch with the draft.
Yeah, and you of course you don't want to tamper when it comes to these when it comes to talking to these players. So if you can get a few days of
right
of that would definitely help. And you said that the Calgary has a little bit of leverage. I would argue the opposite, that the Calgary doesn't have the leverage because these players have made it known that they don't want to resign. So
that's a valid point.
So they gotta try to scramble to get some assets because they don't want the Johnny Gaudreau situation to happen all over again if they don't get something out of it. And with one of these picks, we could possibly see a goalie taken as far as like building up the pipeline. And speaking of goalies, congrats to Panthers prospect Tyler Muzelik on getting an invite to the World Junior Summer Showcase as well. So that's another thing that we could possibly see for the Panthers as far as who they take. But we're gonna break all that down later in the week as the Florida Panthers are building up their prospect pipeline again this week, and we will have more announcements on when D-Camp comes around and Prospect Showcase later on in the next few weeks. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And we are going to be watching this draft at ease tonight. And I hope that you get to enjoy a night of relaxation and just a lot of fun and maybe a lot of drama as teams are probably going to make some big trades tonight. So tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Yep, you can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Winans 8, and some last-minute draft advice for everybody. Like Armando said, watch it at ease, relax, enjoy it, because we were a Stanley Cup finalist, and the teams that are making these big moves are doing it to try to catch a team like the Panthers, and that's a nice position to be in. And when it comes to these second-day picks, you just need a couple of them to hit. They don't all have to be gold mines. You just need to find gold a couple of times, and that makes all the difference. So enjoy it and relax. RELAX.
Pulling an Aaron Rodgers there, that's for sure. But Jacob, thank you so much, and I'll see you next week, my friend.
Can't wait. Thanks.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospect. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And every day, just make sure to come back on Friday for a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. We'll be breaking down some of the trades the Florida Panthers have made and the draft class for the Cats as well. And we're going to break that down on Friday's edition of the show. Sir Armando Velez with Jacob Winans. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.